Thiru M.K. Stalin, Honorable Chief Minister, Honorable Members of the Council of Ministers, my colleague, friends, Mr. Dwivedi, Mr. Wilson, the Advocate General, rightly referred to as the soul and voice and Atma of many issues and of journalism, my good friend Mr. Ram, distinguished members of the legal fraternity, members of this distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, Vanakkam. I was thinking that when the Sengol was handed to us, the real person who deserves the Sengol is the Chief Minister. We have done a partial disservice in not presenting him with a Sengol because Sengol represents righteousness and he has upheld the righteousness inherent in the ethos of a state like Tamil Nadu, which has flown for longest and consistently, irrespective in fact of political color, has flown for longest and especially through Periyar and Anna and Kalaniyar, the flag of federalism. Wilson did me the kindness of telling me just 3 minutes before that we have to speak also. He did realize that a lecture had been fixed in the afternoon today on federalism before the judgment. And it is a strange coincidence that the date of the lecture has happened after the judgment. So despite his extremely short notice, my lecture was on federalism today to a large gathering of lawyers associated with the DMK party and the Congress party. So let me tell you a few interesting facets and facts about that theme before we come to the particularized issue of governors. The particularized issue in this judgment is governors. But that is in the setting of federalism. So the first aspect, I won't take very long, but it will take a few minutes because this is far too important a theme, and a theme on which the DMK and the Honorable Chief Minister have been at the very forefront. And some of them will find it interesting that the first contextual setting of federalism arises from the fact that India is planet Earth's most diverse spot. There is no more diverse spot in the world as planet Earth, with hundreds and thousands of languages, dialects, diversity of smell, food, diet, ritual, the birthplace of 4 religions on planet Earth, the largest number of 2 other religions, or the second largest number of 2 other religions. It's completely a bewildering array of diversity, to which federalism belongs more than anywhere else. Where else will you have the concept of federalism, except in as diverse a spot as India? The second aspect is that India did adopt a top-down federal structure, unlike other countries which are truly federal. For example, many states in the US were pre-existing countries who ceded their sovereignty, gave up their sovereignty to form the United States of America. That was bottom-up federalism. So today you have separate citizenship of states of USA. You have separate flags. We had top-down federalism, but we nevertheless have a concept of federalism. Now, there is no doubt that when our wise founding fathers sat for 3 years in the assembly, Constituent Assembly, the thought uppermost in their mind was the fissiparous tendencies which they were seeing. They were scared that India would not survive this horrific partition, the cruelties and the migrations. So they clearly, in design and conception, created largely a unitary constitution. There is no denying that. In design, conception and inception, it was a largely unitary constitution, which is what led a well-known Australian, Kenneth Weir, to later comment upon it and say that this is actually a quasi-federal country. He coined the phrase quasi-federal. And the Supreme Court later called it amphibious, basically unitary with some federal features. But the real point I wish to make is not that. The real point is the astonishing and remarkable paradox and story how in 75 years, in actual operational reality, India has become much, much more federal than in design, in inception in 1950. This has been called, very interestingly by scholars, accidental federalism or inadvertent federalism. But that is now entrenched. And today in the morning, I identified 6 federating influences over the last 75 years, which have made this a overall much more federal culture. The first of that was linguistic federalism, which happened in the 50s, creation of states along linguistic lines, a recognition of identities. Federalism in India is more about identities than about interests. The second was rapid, prompt, vigorous judicial review, so that the use or misuse of Article 356 has diminished considerably in the last 2 or 3 decades. There are only about 15 or odd examples. I've had the privilege of being in many of them. And this way or that way, from Uttarakhand to Jharkhand to Karnataka twice to Maharashtra to so many other states, the intervention by courts is swift, prompt and vigorous. Unlike when poor Mr. Ramakrishna Hegde lost his place in Karnataka, he filed a petition. He got relief after 3 years or 3 or 4 years, by which time governments had changed twice. So he won the principle and received no relief in practice. Classic case of operation successful, patient dies. That is not the case now, which is why the anti-federal 356 is much, much, much in check. The third influence, the single most biggest quantitative influence, is Panchayati Raj and municipal self-governance. Because another synonym for federalism is decentralization. That has happened as late as the 73rd and 74th Amendments in the 90s. So clearly, you have an army out there. When I as an MP go to my home state Rajasthan or to West Bengal, now from Telangana, sitting across is an elected representative of the Panchayat and more often than not a woman. Some 20 lakh elected women, some 35, 40 lakh total people. This is decentralization, federalism at its best, a third tier of government. And similarly, municipal self-governance. So this was the third aspect of inadvertent federalism in operational reality. The fourth was the liberalization of the 1985s and the 1991 in particular, where the power of the central government and the central ministries considerably diminished. I always like to joke, and Thiru M.K. Stalin should be happy to hear this joke, that a chief minister of any state in India, and certainly of Tamil Nadu, is at least 3 times as more powerful as a cabinet minister at the center. Though both of them occupy the same level in the protocol, in the warrant of precedence. Why? Because you don't need to go to the central government anymore for many things. That is another form of federalism. The fifth was the entrenchment of regional parties. Prior to 1991, it had never happened as an organic evolutionary path. Since 1991, regional parties have been entrenched and embedded in Indian politics across the length and breadth of India, and in many times after 91, larger parts of the territory of India have been governed by regional colors than by either national parties, whether Congress or BJP. Large territories, sometimes 60%. This again was part of unintended, inadvertent federalism. And then again, there was fiscal federalism, which of course has been assaulted very majorly in the last few years. But no doubt, as compared to the time when the Constitution was created, when we devolved funds approximating 30-odd%, we now devolve 41, 42-odd% funds to the states. So there has been a degree of fiscal federalism over the last 75 years. Now, having seen these developments of very cherished, desirable, operational, even though inadvertent federalism, we must turn to how, totally against the spirit of what has happened in 75, and in many cases totally against constitutional text and context, the clock is intended to be set back on federalism. Before I come to governors, take the example of fiscal federalism. I'll give you two striking examples. I'm sure chief ministers like him have many more examples in their pocket because they are the sufferers. When the GST came in 2017, an act was passed acknowledging and recognizing that states will lose revenue because GST regime will take some time to stabilize. It was decided on an ad hoc basis, no doubt, that that stabilization will take 5 years, from 2017 to 22. And therefore, for that period, a cess stabilization fund was created, whereby the shortfall incurred by states would be returned to the states by the center to compensate them for what was said to be the adverse effect of GST. This is pure federalism because actually the enactment of Article 246A itself is seen by many as an assault on federalism. The states had ceded their rights, given up their rights to collect many taxes, to put them into one hodgepodge and one pool of GST, and hence this compensatory scheme. Well, by 2020 or 21, both before and after COVID, it turned out that the total aggregate shortfall of funds due to all the states on the GST account, the shortfall, was 2,35,000 crores. 2,35,000 crores. The central government scrambled, scrounged around and produced 97,000 crores. And then, and this is what I wanted to emphasize about fiscal federalism, in a cruel twist of fate and with one stroke of the pen said, 2,35,000 crores minus 97,000 crores, namely whatever 150 or 140 or lakh odd crores, is written off as an act of God. So an act of God, a force majeure was mounted upon federalism without any attempt to repay in future progressive installments that which was owed to the states. Even a worse example of assaults on fiscal federalism, because this is a setting, it's a much larger setting than merely governors. This is a much larger setting of federalism. Is a little noticed article, Article 293 of the Constitution, which was created as part of our unitary structure to say that a state government cannot borrow without central government permission. That is in the Constitution itself, no problem. But that has been whittled down by government, this central government, by saying that when first we will find your eligibility to borrow. That is a parameter set down that you can be eligible to borrow on various parameters of how you control your fiscal deficit, etc. So Tamil Nadu is allowed or eligible to borrow 100. But we will include in this that which your PSUs have borrowed, which the state has not borrowed. So by adding PSU borrowing, you diminish that borrowing capacity considerably. By such slates of hand, you weaken states. There have been public complaints, and Kerala in this respect, which by the way has managed its fiscal deficit remarkably well, has filed a petition in the Supreme Court saying that 293 cannot allow a whittling down of the power of the state to borrow. They are also sovereign entities, and remember, the 15th Finance Commission discussed this issue, but nowhere suggested that that which the state PSUs borrow should be included in the state's account. But the central government did it, despite the 15th Finance Commission not saying so. And that matter, hopefully, the Supreme Court with regard to federalism will take some interest. Turning now, of course, to the most topical, the issue of governors. We can look at it from three bases. The first basis is the Constituent Assembly debates. I would urge all of you, or most of you, to go back to the Constituent Assembly debates and read all, leave aside Baba Sahib, but even all the others on this subject. And all of them are saying thematically 2 or 3 fundamental things, which all our masters or agents of the central government seem to have forgotten. Indeed, they seem to have forgotten there's a book called the Constitution. First thing they said was that there cannot be diarchy. The word used in this Constitutional Assembly debates is diarchy. There can't be 2 swords in one scabbard. एक म्यान में 2 तलवार नहीं. The meaning of this is obvious. There are no 2 chief ministers. There are no 2 elected bodies. And there is no one super chief minister sitting over another elected chief minister. Second, they said, therefore, we will nominate him. The governor, not elect him, as Mr. Dwivedi said. But then Dr. Ambedkar added a very interesting paragraph. He said, I look at governors to be purely ornamental. The word ornamental is Baba Sahib's. And I believe that the governors are so powerless, they have virtually no powers, that we will find it difficult to find people to nominate. I can understand why many of these wise old gentlemen will be turning over in their graves, seeing what governors, not in Tamil Nadu alone, Tamil Nadu is the third, starting from West Bengal and traveling to Punjab, and then Tamil Nadu is happening. So it is crystal clear that the debates did not envisage a governor, except in the rare cases of minority governments, dissolution, or maybe a report to be sent under 356, which are very special sui generis. In no manner. If it is so clear, then you look at the case law. Forget the recent case law. When was 7 judges sat way back in 74 in Shamsher Singh? Shamsher Singh says the same thing. If the governors, especially in some states, don't read, we must put some readers in their offices. It says very specifically that the powers are limited, they are nominal, they are titular, they must be bound and act only on the aid and advice. So really what is now done by this judgment in fundamental principle is not new in that sense. It is the implementation of that principle to the last mile connectivity on a new set of aberrations. The principles are well established 50 years ago. Routine reports to the central government acting or behaving even 100th in the manner certain governors in certain states behave. And did the eminence Greases, whose comments we hear left, right and center every day, from the new law which we are taught that Parliament is supreme, to the other law which we are taught that Supreme Court is overreaching itself, I want to ask a simple question. Did any of them ever comment when the bills of any state were held up for 2 years, for 1.5 years? Did any of these constitutional functionaries ask that question, how can a bill be held up for 2 years or 1.5 years? The very same persons who are today telling us that Parliament is supreme, the Constitution is not supreme. That the Supreme Court has overreached as the soul, then well, jolly well you have to go by that interpretation, not yours. In the Supreme Court, the Honorable Governor passes 1 or 2 bills. He gives assent to 1 or 2, just before the date is coming. And I happen to appear for the state of Punjab as well.
உடனுக்குடன் செய்திகளை தெரிந்து கொள்ள சன் நியூஸ் பெல் ஐகானை கிளிக் பண்ணுங்க.